Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Nexus, where we take a look at two more teams headed to BlizzCon.
This week we're talking about the teams representing the strongest region in the world, Korea.
So let's start off with the most successful competitive Heroes of the Storm team to date, MVP Black.
MVP Black is a team that has been in the Korean Heroes scene since 2015, but it hasn't always been the five-man powerhouse we know and love today. Early on, it had a lot of roster swaps and adjustments made to the team.
And it wasn't until later to where the team really found themselves with a lot of the members that they have on the roster today. The only major difference is that instead of Rich, they actually had Lockdown from Tempo Storm.
That was the roster that began to build the legacy that is MVP Black. That was the roster that started winning every tournament they could get their hands on against the top teams from around the world.
Until TNL was actually able to upset MVP Black to be able to qualify for BlizzCon of 2015. This is the first time that MVP even struggled against TNL since the core members of the roster had been playing together.
And at that point, MVP Black hit their enrage timer, not losing a tournament again for the next 7 months straight. Early on in 2016, before they qualified for Super League Season 1, Lockdown stepped down from the team to create one with his brother Hyde, the team we know as the Summer Global Champions Tempo Storm. His leaving allowed MVP Black to pick up Rich, who had competed with other teams under the name Oreo Man.
But once Rich joined the roster, they were able to qualify for Super League Season 1. They actually lost the first game of Super League Season 1, but they then proceeded to win 41 games in a row. That means they went undefeated the rest of Super League Season 1, they went undefeated through Power League, they went undefeated through the Spring Global Championships until they finally lost a game in the Chinese Gold League, which they still ended up winning that tournament.
Well, let's talk about these fantastic players, starting with the most recent addition to the roster. Rich has always been the melee flex player, standing out most for his thrall play. Ask around to pro players who the best player in the world is, and a lot of them will tell you it's Rich.
I'd say Rich is probably the best player in the world.
Rich from MP Black. Yeah, I'd say he's the scariest opponent I've ever played against.
I respect Rich a lot. I think he's very, very talented at any hero he plays, which is really impressive to me because he's always kept his pool quite wide.
I mean, Rich is pretty good.
Yeah.
Everybody, even the viewer, feels that guy Sunders. Kyocha is the other guy to fill the flex role for MVP Black. He's always the one on a hero that kind of defines the playstyle for the team depending on the map. He's really the accent piece of every one of their compositions. If it's a heavy melee composition, he's on the Tassadar. He'll play the Abathur for the Thrall or Greymane clones, and more recently he's been on Tracer in order to dive the backline.
The third damage dealer of the team is Sake. As the ranged assassin, he'll be playing whoever is putting the hurt on their opponents, especially Greymane. Sake is not only one of the best ranged assassins in Korea, but in the world as well.
And the support system to allow these three damage dealers to be able to do what they do is going to be Merryday and Sign, the support and warrior players for the team. They are internationally respected for their play no matter what hero they put them on.
Yeah, those two are always incredibly consistent, which is such a great resource for MVP Black in the draft. They never have to worry about those two getting banned out of top tier heroes that they're comfortable on.
Exactly, and they're very influential when it comes to the meta. I mean, they just seem to know how to prioritize any meta hero depending on the map that they're playing. And they're still one of the best teamfighting teams in the world. If it makes it to the late game, they almost never drop a fight.
Their biggest weakness is that they aren't afraid to show secret strategies early on in a tournament. They did this versus some weaker teams with their Diablo on Infernal Shrines before the Spring Global Championship, and nobody else was playing that strategy at that time. Now granted, no other team has really been able to take advantage of that potential flaw.
And they're also vulnerable to really good rotations in the early game. MVP Black is just so comfortable with their dominant team fighting that they'll be willing to wait to the late game in order to take a major fight and pull out a win, which means we've seen teams in the past be able to get that early game advantage if they have perfect rotations.
MVP Black is a team that commands respect because of their track record. Not qualifying for BlizzCon 2015 was without a doubt the most devastating thing to happen to these players' competitive heroes' careers. They have won a global championship and they've beaten every top team in the world. They just haven't competed at a BlizzCon, so you can bet that they are hungry for the title of BlizzCon champions.
Now let's take a look at the other team competing at BlizzCon from Korea, L5. L5 is one of the few teams that ended up spawning after the breakup of Team No Limits, most famous for getting the upset over MVP Black at Super League 2015.
Because of this, 2 of the members of L5 will be competing at BlizzCon for a second time in a row. First is Noblesse, who until creating L5 spent his entire competitive hero's career on TNL.
And originally for TNL, Noblesse filled that melee flex role and then later became their main warrior player. He's most known for his Murden play, and don't get me wrong, it is terrifying and definitely ban-worthy, but when he was pulled away from that hero, you could tell he was out of his comfort zone.
Since then, he has worked to improve his hero pool, and although he still loves his Murden, you can find him making plays on other heroes like Johanna, ETC, and Tyrael, among other warriors.
And alongside Noblesse, to leave TNL to join L5 is SCSC. He's most popular for his very high-risk, high-reward Zeratul play and the fact that he picked up Gathering Power. But more recently, we've seen him fill that range carry role with things like Li Ming and Sergeant Hammer.
While SCSC's flexibility and potential to play multiple roles does allow L5 to have some variety in the types of compositions they want to draft, it maybe is putting him sometimes on heroes where he's less comfortable. For example, the only time he's played a warrior in all of this season of Super League, he played Tyrael versus MVP Black and had some missed sanctifications that were weird.
But the other members of L5 are ones that have been involved in the Korean scene since it began, but this is by far the best they've ever performed. For instance, with Jungha or Swoi, they competed in Super League Season 1, didn't qualify for Super League Season 2. And then with Nacho Jin, he ended up competing in Super League Season 2, but he didn't even make it out of the group stage.
Well, let's start with Swoi, who may be a support prophet. He has been favoring Brightwing as far back as the grand finals of Power League, but especially in the early stages of this season's Super League. And now we're seeing other players like Mary Day from MVP Black or even supports from other regions starting to play her more as well.
I mean, Swoi has his comfort picks, as does Jungha, the one true son of Duratan. If Swoi loves his Brightwing, Jungha definitely loves the Thrall.
That he does. And he fills that bruiser role well, also playing the second warrior when needed. Jungha, until joining L5, was on Mighty, which means not only is this the first time that he is qualified for a global championship, but it's the first time that he's even made it to the top 4 of a Super League as well.
And the last member of L5 is Nacho Jin. He's probably the most flexible player on the roster. And when we look at his games from both Power League and Super League, he has one of the biggest competitive hero pools out of any player going to BlizzCon.
Yeah, he fills that ranged flex role that can go from a second support like Tassadar to something like Falstad. And speaking of his Falstad, he made some serious plays with that hero to eliminate MVP Miracle from the round of 4.
Yeah, and the play that he had on Falstad single-handedly won him MVP in that series. And Nacho Jin, after knocking out MVP Miracle and qualifying for BlizzCon, was brought to tears. Just out of excitement for being the first time that he's been able to qualify for a world championship after being involved in the Korean scene for so long.
We have a lot of players and teams like that this season. There are a lot of players going to BlizzCon who are untested at an international level, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they all fare.
I think when looking back at other world championships, we've had untested teams. For instance, China produced X Team, and then North America, we had Gale Force Esports, and both of them did not look too pretty. But when Korea produced an untested team, which was Tempo Storm, they became world champions.
Well, one great thing that L5 has going for them is they do have 2 ex-members of TNL. So they do have some people who have international experience and can kind of lead the team. And like TNL, their rotations are incredible. There is a lot of hype around both of the teams with ex-TNL members going into the season of Super League, and neither MVP Miracle nor L5 disappointed.
Especially after L5 was able to upset Tempo Storm directly after their win at the Summer Global Championship. And they ended up getting second place in Power League that season.
Right, we'll have to see if once again they can live up to that hype for a third time against global competition as L5 prepare to travel across the world to BlizzCon.
But that's it here for us this week at Beyond the Nexus.
Make sure to check back next week as we'll be talking more in depth about the BlizzCon teams.
And until then, we'll see you in the Nexus.